I'm excited to introduce my first speaker to you tonight. He has, actually, we connected through LinkedIn social media about 3 years ago. And I had just launched, kind of launched the Chosen Generation program. And he reached out to me on LinkedIn and he sent me some information about what he was doing. And I said, wow, that sounds cool. And so I asked him to come on the program. And one thing led to another, and he has been on with me now every single Friday for just over 3 years. He will help you to understand the evils of socialism and Marxism. Now, you hear those things and you may say, well, of course they're not good. But we have an entire generation that has embraced socialism and a nation that is leaning towards Marxism right now in ways that many of us are not even fully cognitive of because of how slowly it has happened, truly. And so I want to welcome to the platform my good friend, Mr. Don Jans. Don, come on up here. Who's your man?
My grandchildren's America. Will it still be the land of the free and the home of the brave? Goodbye, Constitution. Freedom, America. If you ever ask that question about America, will it still be the land of the home, the land of the free and the home of the brave? Have you ever had that thought? Goodbye, Constitution, freedom, America. America is no longer the home of the free. We have been enslaved by our government. We have said goodbye to our Constitution and to our freedom. No invader from outside our lands came into these borders and took away our freedom. They didn't have to. No invader came from outside our border into our land and took or enslaved us. They did not have to. No invader came into our land from outside our borders and threatened our Constitution. They did not have to. We, the American public, we, the American citizens, said it is just too difficult to maintain our freedom and to maintain our Constitution, and we told our enemy, the progressives, you come in and you can rule us and you can threat our Constitution. We've been warned. We had been warned that this was going to happen. Those brave, freedom-loving colonists who bought that freedom for us with their blood, with their grit, and with their determination. They warned us. Those brave people, after they had won that war against all odds, what did they do? They didn't go out and behead and kill those people that they had just defeated for their freedom. They said, come on in, be a part of us. And when they did that, little did they know that they would be a part of the greatest political experiment to ever take place in the world. The birth of the United States of America. A nation that would become a beacon of hope and light for all of the world. Thomas Jefferson said, I predict happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of it. Let me repeat that. Thomas Jefferson. I predict happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of it. We haven't done that. We have not done that. The American citizens have accepted and they have encouraged the government to take care of them. We, the American citizens, we've said, what will the government do about this? What will the government do about that? You come in and you take care of us. So today, our government believes that they have the right of life, that unalienable right that is granted by the Creator. The American government says, no, we have the right of life. And we are under their care from date of conception until date of death and even thereafter. For the government says, we have the power to say, for any reason at all, a live baby can be murdered before they leave the womb of their mother because we declare it to be so. The American government says it is their duty to dictate to us parental leave, child care. They even dictate all forms of social engineering, social justice. And they do this and indoctrinate our children from their very formidable years up through and beyond graduate school. The American government today says it is their duty and their right to all personal property, that they have the right to tell you how much of your personal property you can retain for yourself. The American government has taken it upon themselves to dictate social justice as to who will be winners and who will be losers. The American government, even to this day, says we don't care about the First Amendment. We will tell you what speech you can use because we will tell you what is acceptable and unacceptable hate speech. American government today says we do not care about the First Amendment when it comes to your very basic right of freedom of religion. For we will tell you whether or not you have the right to believe in things like birth control and marriage. This concept that somebody can dictate to us all of these different individual decisions that should be made. This falls under that broad heading we call collectivism. Collectivism is that concept that says, we the group, we the community, we the government, we can tell you the individual what you can and cannot do, and you cannot do anything that violates what we think is in contrast to what the group should be doing. If you think that you have the ability to exceed what we believe the group should do, we will tell you you cannot work to your full ability. Concept of collectivism says the individual is always subjugated to what is determined to be the good of the group. What types of philosophies fall under this concept of collectivism? It's things like Marxism or communism. We call it National Socialism, Democratic Socialism, Progressivism, and of course, Liberalism. All of these different isms have unique characteristics. Socialism is not communism. Progressivism differs from them. And we find so many people who would say that they are for individuals, they are individualists, they are constitutionalists, they are conservatives, whatever term you want to use, but they say we definitely oppose collectivism. What do? They get together and they debate all of these little different nuances. It's a waste of time.
Amen.
Doesn't matter. What we know is they all subjugate the right of the individual to what they determine to be the good of the group. in addition to that, something you must thoroughly understand. And that is that those who would advocate for collectivism, those who would advocate for any of those isms, are very self-centered and very selfish people. Oh, I know. They'll get up on their stage, or they'll stand up on their steps and they'll pound their chest and they will raise their voice and they will say, look what a humanitarian I am. Why, I am for the least amongst us. It is my purpose to reduce poverty. It is my purpose to help those rise above the circumstances of their birth. Look at me. And what do we know? What do we know? What does history teach us? History teaches us that in all situations where you have this concept of collectivism taking hold, poverty increases. Barriers are raised. Look at Venezuela. Perfect example. And yet, what do these collectivists do? They come back to us and they tell us we must continue with this philosophy because we can do it better than it's been done in the past. We know what mistakes were made, and now we can perfect those mistakes. They always tell us that. And they always fail. What you have to understand is that all of these people, be they progressives, liberals, communists, socialists, whatever you want to call them, collectivists, are selfish and self-centered, and they are only out to bring glory to themselves. They never help the people that they proclaim they're going to help. They always hurt them. This type of philosophy always destroys individuals, families, and nations. Our nation was originally founded under this concept of collectivism. When you go back and you look at Jamestown and Plymouth, both of these colonies began under that concept of collectivism, where the rights of the individual were subjugated to the good of the group, where private property was not owned by the individual, but private property was owned by the community, and then they would share with the community as the community determined the needs of the people. Both of these colonies were very near total extinction. And they said, we have to change something or we're not going to be around. So they looked at it and said, why don't we do this? Why don't we look at the individual and say, individual, you are an independent and a self-reliant being. You have the capacity and the capability to take care of yourself. And what we will do is all property can be owned by individuals. And you can try to excel, you can exceed, you can drive, all of your ambition can be devoted to your entrepreneurship. What happened? Those two colonies began to flourish. They began to grow. People from Europe heard about this new concept and said, you know, there is this place in America. And they say, you are not restricted to the limitations of your birth. You are not restricted by what some noble will tell you you can do. Why, you can go to America and you can own property. Why, you can go to America and you can be ambitious. You can build. And if you're successful, you reap. And if you're not successful, you can try again. But it's you. It is you. And those people from Europe came over, and they did so well, and the colonies flourished, and they grew. Pretty soon they came to the position where they said, wow, this has worked so well for us as individuals, we as a nation should be independent and self-reliant. There were about a third of the people that said, that's a great idea. About a third of them that said, nah, I don't think so. I think we should stay under Mother Great Britain. And about a third of them that said, I don't care. Doesn't matter. I'm not even going to pay any attention. So these colonists debated this issue. And those who said we want freedom said so and fully understood what the odds were of them ever winning their freedom. They looked across the ocean and they looked at Great Britain and they said, look at Great Britain. They have the most powerful navy in the world at this time. What? We know they're powerful. How do we know? Because they've already blockaded our seaports. And they looked and said, and look at their army. Their army is powerful. How do we know it's powerful? It's right here in our midst. We have been forced to house those soldiers in our homes. We know it's powerful. And they looked and they said, and not only that, but they have the finances. They have the financial resources to clothe those soldiers and sailors, to feed those soldiers and sailors, to give those soldiers and sailors weapons and ammunition for those weapons. And what do we have? We don't even have a navy. We have a ragtag army at best. And we don't have the finances to build a navy or to build an army. The odds against us are great, and I don't know if we can become free. So deeply did that love of freedom burn in them. So deeply did they aspire to be an independent and a free nation with independent and free people. They said, we will declare our independence from Great Britain in spite of the odds. Lo and behold, they won. Against all odds, they won that war. And then what did they do? They came along and they said, what we must do now is we must build our own nation, we must build our own government, and we must build it in such a way that it will protect us and our freedom, and it will protect all future Americans and their freedom. First thing they said we're going to do, we're going to have a nation that operates under rule of law. We'll write the law, everybody will know the law, everybody will be equal under the law. That was totally different from anything they had known before. Laws could be changed, laws were changed. King could say, I don't like that, we're going to do this. He said, that doesn't work. That's for tyrannies. Rule of law is for free people. So they went together and they said, what we'll do is we will draft a constitution. And that constitution will be the law of the land. Now, make no mistake. You must thoroughly understand that when these colonists, these freedom-loving colonists said, we're going to form a government and we're going to draft a constitution, they were not naive, foolish people. They were very smart. And they said, we understand very clearly that this government we are forming is the single biggest threat to our freedom. Did you hear that? This government we are forming is the single biggest threat to our freedom. So they said what we have to do is we have to have a government that is very limited in power. And they wrote 26 powers they expressly gave to the government in that Constitution. Most of those powers that they gave the federal government had to deal with what they considered to be the most important function of government, and that was to protect the citizens from outside invaders. To make sure that absolutely nobody misunderstood this concept, that government was to be limited, they added the Bill of Rights and the 10th Amendment. And in that Bill of Rights and that 10th Amendment, they very clearly said, any power not specifically given to the federal government. What power? Those 26 in the Constitution. Anything else is reserved for the states and for the people. Limited government. They also fully understood that Consolidated power was always the birth of tyranny. And they said, we have to have a government where power cannot and will not be consolidated. So they said, here's what we'll do. We will go and we will form a government with 3 co-equal branches. And those 3 co-equal branches will have checks and balances one against the other. Also, we will complicate it further. And what we're going to do is we are going to, in the legislative branch, put in 2 independent houses. Now, my friends, when you complicate a government like this, you're not constructing a government to get things done in Washington. You have to understand that. It was not their concept that Washington should get things done. They fully understood that every time Washington got something done, Washington gained power, and the people lost freedom. It was their intent that all laws be thoroughly deliberated, go through a thorough process of deliberation, and it was their intent that everybody who would vote on that law would have read it and understood it. They never, ever conceived that this nation they were building to be a free nation would ever have a Speaker of the House rise up before the American public and state, we must pass this 22,000 plus omnibus bill so we can find out what is in it that is absolutely contrary to the intent of the founders, and I think you could argue contrary to the intent of the Constitution. The most unique thing those founders did is they said, we're going to turn the world upside down. They knew that throughout the world at that time, governments were sovereign and the people were the servants. Well, they had lived under it. That government in London was sovereign and they were the servants to that government in London. They said, this is the way it's going to work. In America, people will be sovereign. People will be the ruler. The government will be the servant. Turn the world upside down. Those people in Europe looked at these naive colonists and laughed at them, scoffed at them, pointed their finger and said, you naive fools. Do you not understand? People cannot rule themselves. Do you not understand? A sovereign must be committed to his kingdom. A sovereign must be informed about the happenings of his kingdom. A sovereign must be involved in the runnings of his kingdom. Every time that sovereign becomes less committed, less informed, or less involved, what he does is he abdicates some of his power, some of his rights to a regent. And as that sovereign abdicates more and more power and more rights to that regent, the regent becomes the sovereign. And he who was sovereign, he becomes the servant. Or he becomes the slave. This is what we, the American people, have done. We have abdicated our power, we have given our rights away, and we have given them to the government, the regent. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Amongst these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are formed amongst men and receive their just power from the consent of the government. that at any time should any form of government become detrimental to these ends, that at any time should that form of government become detrimental to these ends, listen carefully, it's right in the Declaration of Independence. It is the right of the people to abolish it or to alter it. That time is now. That government that is currently in power has become detrimental to those ends. That government that is in power believes it has given the people those unalienable rights given to us by our Creator: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. That government in power has abolished the rule of law. But today, the Supreme Court makes new law anytime it wants under the euphemism of a ruling or an opinion. The executive branch makes a law anytime it wants under the euphemism of a regulation or a presidential order. Our government has abolished that concept of rule of law. We are no longer a government that is limited. We are now a nation with a huge, all-powerful government. We are no longer a nation with divided government. The power in our government has been consolidated in the judiciary and in the executive branch. Most importantly, we are no longer a nation where we the people are the ruler, where we the people are the sovereign, and those in government are the servant. Government is today our sovereign, and we are its slave. What do we do? What do we do? A sovereign must be committed. A sovereign must be informed. And a sovereign must be involved. We must learn who is our enemy, who has taken this freedom away from us, or to whom have we given it, who has torched our Constitution, and we cheered while they burned it. It's the progressives. It is the progressives. We must understand who are these progressives and what are they professing. One of the things that the progressives, communists, the collectivists thoroughly understand is if you tell a lie often enough and it is a big enough lie, people will believe it. We call these lies, we call these myths, but in today's world, in our country, many of these have become viewed as true. Not only by the progressive, but by those who would also advocate that they are individualists, that they are constitutionalists, that they are freedom-loving Americans. What are some of these myths? Progressives have sold the idea that a government safety net is the essence of a humane government. What a lie! Government safety nets have always, look out throughout history, government safety nets have always destroyed individuals. Government safety nets have always destroyed the very essence of society, the family. Government safety nets have destroyed nations time after time after time. Again, look at Venezuela. Thomas Jefferson said, democracy will cease to exist if you take from those who would work and give to those who would not. Myth number 2. There is such a thing as income inequality. How do you have income inequality when you are rewarded based on the based on what the marketplace says you should be paid, based on your efforts and your contribution. You are receiving what the marketplace says is fair. Income inequality cannot and does not exist in a free and in a capitalistic nation. And anybody who talks about income inequality, you tell them then they are liars if they claim they believe in capitalism. It cannot exist. Income inequality can only and does only exist in a socialist type economy where it is the government, the society, the community that says we are going to distribute based on need and not on production. So somebody now who receives more but has a lesser need is receiving on an income inequality basis. It can only exist in socialism. It cannot exist in a free economic economy. And anybody who claims that it does, you challenge them. Myth. A progressive income tax is a fair and a just tax. A progressive income tax is what Karl Marx said was absolutely essential to fundamentally transform a free capitalistic society to a fair and just classless society or a communist society. Because he said a progressive income tax is the best way to distribute wealth or redistribute wealth. And what do we have today? We have on supposedly the conservative platform debate for President of the United States people who advocate they are constitutionalists, people who advocate they are conservatives, people who advocate they believe in the worth of the individual. And are they discussing whether we should have a progressive income tax? No. They're discussing what should the rates be. It shouldn't be 25, it should be 35. It shouldn't be 35, it should be 45. Folks, progressive income tax is not a fair tax in a free capitalistic society. Myth. FDR was a great president, and his economic policies brought us out of the Great Depression. It is so absurd. And it's being taught in our grade schools, it's being taught in our high schools, it's being taught in our colleges. Do you understand that the United States was going into a very severe recession in 1937 and 38? That's Roosevelt's second term in office. Every bit as great as what was the recession he inherited. And the reason we were going into that recession in 37 and 38 is because of his economic policies. Do you understand that at the beginning of Roosevelt's second term, the unemployment rate was higher than it was at the beginning of his first term because of his economic policies? They suffered greatly under Roosevelt's economic policies, and we are suffering greatly under those same policies today. If Roosevelt was not the most damaging president, he was certainly in the top three. Myth. The greed that they claim is developed under capitalism is damaging. Folks, that's false. That greed has brought about great progress. It brought about the invention of steel, the new invention of steel. It brought about how you make an automobile on an assembly line. That greed is what has developed progress and innovation. It is that greed that has consistently lowered the level of poverty. It is that greed that has consistently lowered the barriers to success. Engels went along in the late 1840s in a speech in Germany, and he said, it is competition that is damaging. Competition is damaging to the individual. Competition is damaging to society. We are all competitive beings. It is that competition that drives us to work, to run faster, to swim faster, to work harder, to develop more, to innovate more, to rise in life, to bring other people with us. These myths we must understand. You must understand that the myth of the progressive has been deeply embedded in the American psyche today. So once we're informed, now we must become involved. Lenin said, "You give me a child for 4 years, and I'll have him for a lifetime." The progressive thoroughly understands this. The progressive has had our children. And look at those who have followed Bernie Sanders. That's the result. So what do? You must know what your children and your grandchildren are being taught. You must look at their homework. You must look at their textbooks. You must go down to the schools and sit in the classrooms. You must go to these school board meetings. And then you must speak up intelligently and coherently. It is our cities today that are as damaging to entrepreneurship and to small business as is the federal government. Our city governments. And what do? We sit at home and we scream in disdain at the television. Or we write snide comments on Facebook. Why aren't we at the city council meeting? Listening, contributing, speaking intelligently and coherently. You must become involved. And then you will become involved in the county government. That will lead to the state government, and that will lead to the federal government involvement. Sometimes you're going to have to be involved in elections. You're going to have to look at different candidates, and you're going to have to determine, is that candidate truly an individualist, a constitutionalist, or is he just another person that's trying to slow down the movement of the progressive movement? You must determine this. Most critically, and I want you to listen very carefully, most critically, we were warned about this time after time after time by our founders. We must elect people of the highest character and the greatest veracity. And if their character doesn't measure and their veracity doesn't measure, you do not support them. Now here's the problem. There are many, many times when you will be searching for these candidates. Who is a true constitutionalist, a true freedom-loving American? Who has great character and great veracity? And many times, you look around and you won't find anybody. You won't find a soul until you look in the mirror. And there that person stands. That means that you are the one that must run for office. School board, city council, county, state, federal. You must be committed, informed, involved, and committed. I want to tell you right now tonight that the odds we face of altering our government are absolutely no more daunting than were the odds those colonists faced when they won that freedom for us. But they were committed. So badly did they want to be free, independent people. We hear them. Is life so dear? Is peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others might choose, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. That, my friends, is commitment. Those colonists faced a daunting choice, and they made their choice. We as a nation face a daunting choice. What will our choice importantly, everyone in this room tonight is facing a choice. My question is, what will your choice be? Thank you so much.